The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when Marcus looked at his wife with pure disgust. "Look at you," he sneered, adjusting his $5,000 silk tie. "You're just a useless anchor, Thor. I'm about to close the biggest deal of the decade, and you're sitting there in sweatpants, eating cereal. You're fat, you're lazy, and quite frankly, you're embarrassing." He slammed the door, leaving her alone in the silence of their suburban kitchen. Marcus thought he was the king of the world. He had no idea that the deal of the decade was an acquisition by Vanguard Holdings, and he certainly had no idea that the mysterious, faceless CEO of Vanguard was the woman he just called useless. The check for $840 million was sitting on the counter right next to her cereal bowl, and Marcus was about to have the worst day of his life. The morning rain battered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, but inside the Sterling household, or rather, the modest four-bedroom house in the suburbs of Seattle that Marcus insisted they live in, the atmosphere was far stormier. Thor Sterling stood by the granite island, clutching a lukewarm mug of coffee. She caught her reflection in the darkened window of the microwave. She looked tired. Her hair, once a vibrant chestnut cascade, was tied up in a messy, fraying bun. She wore an oversized grey t-shirt that hid the curves she had gained after giving birth to their daughter, Lily, 2 years ago. To the outside world, and specifically to her husband, Thor was the picture of a woman who had let herself go. "Are you even listening to me?" Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts like a serrated knife. Thor blinked, turning to face him. Marcus Sterling was undeniably handsome in the conventional sense. Sharp jawline, impeccably styled blonde hair, and a physique honed by hours at an exclusive gym he claimed was necessary for networking. He was standing by the hallway mirror, obsessively adjusting his cufflinks. "I heard you, Marcus," Thor said softly. Her voice was raspy from lack of sleep. She had been up until 4 a.m., reviewing merger contracts with her legal team in Zurich. "You need the grey suit dry-cleaned by tomorrow." "Not just dry-cleaned, Thor. Pristine," Marcus snapped, spinning around to face her. His eyes scanned her body, his lip curling in a familiar expression of disdain. "God, look at you. It's 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. Do you plan on doing anything productive today? Or is the plan to just expand into the sofa?" Thor took a sip of coffee to hide the smirk threatening to form on her lips. If only he knew. "I have a lot to do, actually," she said calmly. "Lily has a pediatrician appointment, and I need to handle some household finances." Marcus scoffed, a harsh, barking sound. "Household finances? You mean spending my money? Let's be real, Thor. You haven't contributed a dime to this family in 3 years. I'm the one out there, killing myself, climbing the ladder at Novus Tech. I'm the one putting food on this table." He walked over, grabbing an apple from the bowl and taking a violent bite. "I have a meeting today with the board. Rumor is, Vanguard Holdings is finally sending a representative to discuss the acquisition. If I nail this presentation, I'm looking at a VP position. That's a 7-figure salary, Thor. Do you understand what that means?" "That would be wonderful for you, Marcus," she said, her tone neutral. "For me?" He laughed cruelly. "Yeah, it would be. Maybe then I could afford a nanny who actually looks presentable, instead of relying on whatever this is." He gestured vaguely at her body. "You used to be stunning, you know, when we met. Now, you're just heavy. Useless and heavy." The words landed with a dull thud. Years ago, they might have made her cry. They might have sent her running to the bathroom to sob into a towel. But today? Today was October 14th. Today was the day the embargo lifted. Thor looked him dead in the eye. "Be careful, Marcus. You never know who's watching or who's signing your paychecks. You're delusional, he muttered, checking his Rolex, a watch she had bought him anonymously for his birthday, though he thought it was a corporate gift. I'm leaving. Don't wait up. I'll probably be celebrating with the team. Real winners. He grabbed his leather briefcase and stormed out the front door. The house shook slightly as he slammed it. Thor waited 10 seconds. She listened to the roar of his leased Porsche Macan fading down the driveway. The moment the silence returned, Thor's posture changed. The slump in her shoulders vanished. She walked over to the pantry, pushed aside a box of generic cornflakes, and pressed her thumb against a biometric scanner hidden behind the shelf. A click echoed, and a small panel opened, revealing a secure encrypted laptop and a burner phone. She picked up the phone and dialed a number, saved simply as J. Status, she said. Her voice was no longer soft and submissive. It was cold, commanding, and sharp as diamond. Julian here, the voice on the other end answered immediately. Julian Vance was her chief operating officer, and the only person in the world, aside from her lawyer, who knew the truth. The board of Novus Tech is assembling at 10 a.m. They believe they are meeting a proxy for the COO of Vanguard. The paperwork for the $840 million acquisition is ready for counter-signature. And the specific clause I requested? Thor asked, walking into the living room and opening the laptop. Clause 14b. It's in there, Julian confirmed, sounding amused. The Ethical Leadership Retention Clause. It gives Vanguard total discretion to terminate any executive staff at Novus Tech immediately upon acquisition, without severance, if they fail a moral character assessment. Good, Thor typed in a complex password, bringing up a live feed of the stock market. Vanguard Holdings was trading up 4%. Her net worth had increased by $12 million, while Marcus was screaming at her about dry cleaning. Are you coming in? Julian asked. Not yet, Thor said, catching her reflection in the laptop screen. Marcus thinks I'm a useless, fat housewife. I think I need to play the part a little longer. I want to see his face when he realizes he's pitching his groundbreaking strategy to the woman he just called an embarrassment. He's bringing a guest, by the way, Julian added, his tone dropping. Thor paused. A guest? Jessica Thorne, his assistant. She's listed on the manifest for the boardroom meeting. Thor, the surveillance team picked up audio from his car. He's not planning to celebrate with the team tonight. He has a reservation at Le Bernardin for 2. And it's not for you. Thor felt a cold spike in her chest. She knew Marcus was arrogant. She knew he was verbally abusive, but she had held on to a sliver of hope that he was, at the very least, loyal. I see, Thor said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Confirm the reservation? Confirmed. 8:00 p.m., under the name Future VP. Thor let out a dark, humorless laugh. Future VP, that's rich. She closed the laptop. The sadness she expected to feel wasn't there. Instead, it was replaced by a burning, focused rage. It was the same energy she had used to build Vanguard Holdings from a garage startup into a global conglomerate in finance and technology. She had hidden her success from Marcus because she wanted to be loved for herself, not her money. She wanted to know if the man she married would stick by her through richer or poorer. She had pretended to lose her job 3 years ago. She had pretended the weight gain was impossible to lose. She had tested him, and he had failed every single test. Julian, Thor said, walking toward the stairs, prepare the car, not the minivan. Send the Maybach, but park it 3 blocks away. I'm going to make an appearance at Novus Tech today. As Mrs. Sterling, or as the CEO? Neither, Thor said, reaching up and pulling the pins out of her hair, letting the chestnut waves fall around her shoulders. She stripped off the baggy t-shirt, revealing that while she wasn't a size 0, she was powerful, healthy, and imposing. I'm going as the worst nightmare of a man who thinks he's untouchable. I'll see you in an hour. Thor marched upstairs to the back of her closet, past the sweatpants and the mom jeans. She pushed aside the false wall she had installed 2 years ago. Behind it hung a row of suits, Italian wool, bespoke, sharp enough to cut glass. She reached for a navy blue power suit and a pair of red-bottomed heels. Marcus wanted a trophy wife? He was about to find out that he was married to the hunter, not the trophy. Meanwhile, at Novus Tech headquarters, Marcus strode into the lobby of Novus Tech, the glass doors parting for him like the Red Sea. He felt electric. Today was the day. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," the receptionist chirped. "Morning, Brenda. Keep my calls." He dismissed her without looking, heading straight for the elevators. Waiting inside the elevator was Jessica Thorne. She was everything Thor wasn't right now. Blonde, petite, 24 years old, and wearing a skirt that was technically against HR policy, but acceptable if you looked like her. "Hey, Tiger," Jessica purred, checking the camera before leaning in to straighten his tie. "You ready to crush this?" "Baby, I was born ready," Marcus grinned, letting his hand linger on her waist. "Once I close this deal with Vanguard, I'm untouchable. The commission alone is going to be 7 figures. I was thinking, maybe we look at that condo in Miami this weekend?" Jessica's eyes lit up. "And what about her?" Marcus rolled his eyes. "Thor? Please." I left her crying in the kitchen. She's dead weight, Jess. Once the check clears and the promotion is signed, I'm filing the papers. I just need to make sure I secure the assets first. She's too stupid to understand a prenup anyway. "You're so bad," Jessica giggled. "I'm just realistic," Marcus said, checking his reflection in the mirrored elevator walls one last time. "Survival of the fittest. And right now, I'm the apex predator." The elevator dinged at the top floor, Executive Conference Room A. Marcus stepped out, flanked by Jessica. He walked down the corridor toward the heavy oak doors where the board of directors and the mysterious Vanguard representative were waiting. He had prepared his slides. He had rehearsed his speech. He was ready to sell Novus Tech for $840 million and claim all the credit. He pushed the doors open. The room was filled with grey-haired men in suits, the board of directors for Novus. But at the head of the table, the chair reserved for the Vanguard CEO was empty. "Where are they?" Marcus asked, setting his briefcase down. "Running late," the chairman, Mr. Henderson, said nervously. "Apparently there's been a last-minute change. The CEO of Vanguard decided to come personally." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. Personally? The ghost CEO? No one has ever seen them in public. "Well, they're coming today," Henderson said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "And Marcus, be on your best behavior. This deal is worth nearly $1 billion. If you screw this up, you won't just be fired, you'll be blacklisted from the industry." "Relax, Henderson," Marcus smirked, plugging his laptop into the projector. "I can handle anyone. I can charm a snake out of a basket. Whoever this CEO is, they're going to be eating out of the palm of my hand." At that exact moment, the heavy double doors at the back of the room didn't just open. They were thrown wide. The sound of sharp, rhythmic clicking echoed on the marble floor. Click, click, click. Every head in the room turned. Marcus froze. He recognized the silhouette. He recognized the walk, but his brain couldn't compute the context. It was a woman. She was wearing a navy blue bespoke suit that screamed money. Her hair was blown out in fierce waves. Her makeup was flawless. She radiated a level of power that made the air in the room feel thin. She walked straight to the head of the table, threw a leather folder down with a heavy thud, and turned slowly to face the room. Marcus's jaw dropped. His heart hammered against his ribs. The woman took off her sunglasses, revealing piercing green eyes that bored straight into his soul. "Gentlemen," Thor Sterling said, her voice smooth and dangerous, "I apologize for the delay. I had to take out the trash before I left the house." She looked directly at Marcus. "Shall we begin?" The silence in Executive Conference Room A was so absolute that the hum of the air conditioning sounded like a jet engine. Marcus stood frozen, his hand still hovering over his laptop. His brain was misfiring, struggling to reconcile two completely contradictory images. One was the image of Thor from 2 hours ago, baggy t-shirt, messy bun, smelling of baby formula and old coffee. The other was the woman sitting 10 feet away at the head of the table, fierce, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than his car, and radiating a terrifying calmness. "Thor," Marcus whispered, the name escaping his lips before he could stop it. It sounded weak, pathetic. Mr. Henderson, the chairman of Novus Tech, looked between them, confused. "Mr. Sterling, you know Miss Vance?" "Miss Vance?" Marcus repeated, his eyes darting to Thor. Thor didn't even blink. She clasped her hands on the mahogany table, her manicured fingers interlaced. "Mr. Sterling and I have an acquaintance," she said, her tone cool and devoid of any warmth. "But in this room, Mr. Henderson, I am not Thor. I am the CEO of Vanguard Holdings, and time is money, specifically my money." She gestured toward the screen behind Marcus. "You have 30 minutes to convince me not to dissolve your department and fire everyone in this room. Proceed." Marcus felt a bead of sweat roll down his spine. Vance. It was her maiden name. She had told him she changed it when they got married. Had she lied? Or was this some elaborate, sick joke? She must be an actress, Marcus thought frantically. This is a prank. She hired a lookalike. There is no way my wife, the woman who can't even figure out the thermostat, is running a billion-dollar hedge fund. He tried to regain his composure. He was Marcus Sterling. He was the sales king. He cleared his throat, flashed his winning smile, the one that usually melted receptionists and clients alike, and turned to the board. "Apologies," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly before finding its rhythm. "The resemblance to a relative caught me off guard. But let's talk numbers." He clicked the remote. A graph appeared on the screen, showing a sharp upward trend. "As you can see," Marcus boomed, walking toward the screen, "Novus Tech has increased market share by 15% in the last quarter. My strategy has been aggressive. We've cut the dead weight," he glanced involuntarily at Thor, "and focused on high-yield assets. If Vanguard acquires us, I propose a restructuring of the sales division. We cut the bottom 20% of the staff, automate the client intake, and save $3 million a year in salaries." He looked at Thor, expecting her to be impressed. He knew she was thrifty at home, always clipping coupons. Surely she'd love cost-cutting. Thor leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at him. "You propose firing 40 people to save $3 million?" she asked. "Efficiency is key, Ms. Vance," Marcus said, emphasizing her false name with a hint of sarcasm. "Interesting," Thor said. She opened the leather folder she had thrown on the table. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Because according to my due diligence, your aggressive strategy cost the company 5 major clients last month. You pushed for higher fees, and they walked to our competitors. You didn't increase market share, Mr. Sterling. You inflated the projected earnings by counting deals that haven't closed yet. The room went deadly silent. Mr. Henderson turned pale. "Is that true, Marcus?" Marcus stammered. Those deals are practically done. Verbal agreements." "A verbal agreement isn't worth the paper it's not written on," Thor snapped. "And speaking of dead weight, let's talk about your expense account." Marcus froze. Thor picked up another document. "Last month alone, $4,500 at the Sapphire Club, $2,000 for a client dinner at Nobu on a Friday night, when no client was listed in the log, and a $300 charge for services at a spa in downtown." Jessica Thorne, sitting in the corner taking notes, suddenly stopped typing. Her face flushed pink. "That's networking," Marcus choked out, his collar feeling suddenly too tight. "You have to spend money to make money." "You're spending company money to fuel your own ego," Thor corrected him, her voice rising just enough to command absolute authority. "You call your wife useless because she doesn't bring in a paycheck, yet you treat this company's funds like your personal piggy bank. Tell me, Mr. Sterling, if I buy this company today, why shouldn't the first thing I do be firing you for embezzlement?" The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Embezzlement. Marcus felt his knees go weak. This wasn't just a bad meeting. This was a dissection. She knew everything. "How?" I can explain," Marcus pleaded, his arrogance evaporating. He looked at the other board members for support, but they were all looking down at their papers, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. "You can explain it to the auditors later," Thor said dismissively. She checked her watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Marcus's annual bonus. "We'll take a 15-minute recess. When we return, I want to hear from someone who actually knows how to run a P&L sheet. Mr. Henderson, step up your game, or I'm walking." She stood up. Recess. As the board members scrambled to get coffee and whisper among themselves, Marcus stood alone at the front of the room, the projector light beaming onto his chest like a target. He watched his wife, no, this stranger, walk out the door. He needed answers. And he needed them now. The hallway outside the conference room was lined with abstract art and frantic executives. Marcus grabbed Jessica by the arm and pulled her into a small alcove near the fire exit. "Did you know?" he hissed, his eyes wide and manic. "Ow, you're hurting me!" Jessica pulled her arm away, rubbing the spot where he had grabbed her. "Did I know what? That the CEO was a woman? That the CEO is my wife," Marcus shouted in a harsh whisper. Jessica stared at him, then let out a nervous laugh. "What? Marcus, have you lost your mind? You showed me a picture of your wife, the heavy one, the one in the sweatpants. That woman in there she's a goddess. She's wearing a Versace limited edition blazer. There is no way that is the same person." "It's her," Marcus insisted, running a hand through his perfectly gelled hair, messing it up for the first time in years. "The voice, the eyes, even the way she looks at me like I'm a piece of gum on her shoe. It's Thor. But she's supposed to be broke. She clips coupons for milk, Jess. She drives a 2015 Honda Odyssey. Maybe she has a twin," Jessica suggested, though she looked doubtful. "Or maybe you just don't know your wife as well as you think." "I know her," Marcus snapped. "She's lazy. She sits at home all day. She can't possibly be running Vanguard." "Well, whoever she is," Jessica said, her voice turning icy, "she just accused you of embezzlement in front of the entire board. And she mentioned the spa. Marcus, if they audit the receipts and see my name on the guest list for that client meeting, I'm fired too." "Relax," Marcus said, though he was hyperventilating. "I can fix this. I can charm her. If that is Thor, she loves me. She's obsessed with me. She's probably just doing this to get my attention, Because I've been working late. It's a power play, a desperate cry for help. She didn't look desperate, Marcus. She looked like she was about to eat you alive. Watch me, Marcus said, straightening his tie. I'm going to confront her. I'll remind her who wears the pants in this relationship. While Marcus stormed off toward the VIP lounge, where the Vanguard team was holding court, Jessica headed for the ladies' room to reapply her lipstick and calm her nerves. She pushed open the door to the restroom. It was empty, except for one person washing their hands at the marble sink. It was Thor. Jessica froze. Up close, the woman was even more intimidating. She was taller than Jessica, her posture perfect. She was washing her hands with a slow, deliberate calmness. Jessica took a deep breath. She was younger. She was the one Marcus wanted. She decided to mark her territory. She walked to the mirror next to Thor and pulled out her lipstick. "Quite a show you put on in there," Jessica said, watching Thor's reflection. Thor didn't look up. She dried her hands on a paper towel. "I don't put on shows, Miss Thorne. I do business." "You know," Jessica said, applying a coat of bright red, "Marcus talks about his wife a lot. He says she's simple, a bit of a burden. He says he feels sorry for her." Thor finally turned. She leaned against the sink, crossing her arms. Her expression wasn't angry, it was amused. "Is that what he says?" "Yeah," Jessica smirked, dropping the lipstick into her purse. "He says he needs a woman who matches his ambition. Someone who looks good on his arm. He's planning to leave her, you know. As soon as this big bonus check clears. We're going to Miami." Thor let out a soft laugh. It was a terrifying sound. Miami. How cliché. She took a step toward Jessica. Thor wasn't wearing 6-inch heels, but she towered over the younger woman with sheer presence. "Let me give you a piece of advice, Jessica." "From one woman to another," Thor said softly. "You think you're winning a prize. You think stealing a husband makes you special. But you're not stealing a prize. You're stealing a liability." "Excuse me," Jessica bristled. "Marcus is a sinking ship," Thor said, her eyes boring into Jessica's. "He's drowning in debt you don't know about. He leases that car. The house is in my name. And that bonus check he's promising you, it depends entirely on my signature." Jessica's confidence faltered. You're bluffing." "Am I?" Thor leaned in close, whispering into Jessica's ear. "Check his credit score, honey, then check mine." Thor straightened up, adjusted her blazer, and walked toward the door. "Oh, and Jessica? You might want to update your resume. I have a zero-tolerance policy for employees who help executives fake expense reports." She walked out, leaving Jessica staring into the mirror, the tube of lipstick trembling in her hand. Thor stepped back into the hallway, feeling a rush of adrenaline. She had played the fat, useless housewife for 3 years to see if Marcus loved her or just needed a maid. She had her answer. Now, she was done playing. "Thor!" She turned. Marcus was marching down the hallway toward her, his face red with exertion. He cornered her near the elevators, blocking her path. "Drop the act," Marcus snarled, pointing a finger in her face. "I don't know who you think you are, coming into my office, humiliating me." "Lower your voice," Thor said calmly. "You are addressing the owner of this building." "I'm addressing my wife," Marcus shouted. "You think I don't know it's you? What is this? Did you win the lottery? Did your dad die and leave you a fortune you didn't tell me about?" "I built this," Thor said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "While you were out drinking with clients, I was coding. While you were sleeping in on Sundays, I was analyzing markets. while you were calling me fat and lazy. I was building an empire, Marcus. I didn't tell you because I wanted to know if you loved me or if you just wanted a trophy. Marcus stared at her, his mouth agape. The realization was slowly sinking in. The late nights she claimed were insomnia, the constant typing on her laptop. So, you're rich, Marcus said, a slow, greedy smile spreading across his face. The anger vanished, replaced instantly by calculation. Thor, baby? Why didn't you say so? My God, this is amazing. We're rich. We can finally buy that villa in Tuscany. I can quit this stupid job and we can... He reached out to grab her shoulders, to pull her into a hug. Thor took a step back, looking at him with pure disgust. We? She asked. There is no we, Marcus. You made that very clear this morning when you called me an anchor. I was stressed, Marcus pleaded, holding his hands up. Baby, you know I get cranky when my blood sugar is low. I didn't mean it. I love you. You're the mother of my child. I am, Thor nodded. And that is the only reason I'm not destroying you completely. Yet. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen and held it up. But the meeting is about to restart. And I have one final slide to show the board. It's about a clause in the acquisition contract called ethical leadership. What does that mean? Marcus asked, fear creeping back into his eyes. It means, Thor smiled, that Vanguard only retains employees with high moral character. And I have a recording from the elevator this morning. Something about me being dead weight and you securing the assets before dumping me. Marcus turned white. You wouldn't? He whispered. I would, Thor said. I'll see you in the boardroom, Mr. Sterling. Don't be late, I hate waiting. She turned and walked away, the click of her heels echoing like a countdown clock. Marcus stood alone in the hallway. He realized with a sickening lurch in his stomach that the useless woman he had bullied for years was holding a nuclear launch code, and she had just pointed it directly at him. The air in Executive Conference Room A was heavy, suffocating. When Marcus re-entered, he felt like a man walking to the gallows, yet his ego refused to let him accept the reality of the situation. He adjusted his tie, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and took his seat. He glanced at Jessica, but she was staring intently at her laptop, refusing to make eye contact. Thor was already seated at the head of the table. She didn't look up as he entered. She was typing something on her phone, her expression unreadable. Welcome back, Thor said, setting the phone down face down. The sharp click of the device hitting the mahogany table echoed like a gunshot. Let's proceed. Mr. Sterling, before the break, you were advocating for a restructuring of the sales division to cut dead weight. I've taken your advice to heart. Marcus puffed out his chest slightly. She's bluffing, he told himself. She needs me. She needs this company. She's not going to torch an $840 million deal just to spite me. I'm glad to hear that, Marcus said, his voice regaining some of its oily confidence. It's the only logical move. Cut the bottom 20%, streamline the management. Actually, Thor interrupted, pressing a button on the remote. The screen behind her changed. The graph of rising profits vanished, replaced by a complex organizational chart of Novus Tech. I had my team run a simulation during the break. We found that the biggest drain on resources isn't the bottom 20% of the sales staff. It's the top. A murmur went through the board members. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, cleaning his glasses. The top, Ms. Vance? Precisely, Thor said, standing up and walking slowly toward the screen. She pointed a laser pointer at the box labeled VP of Sales. The sheer amount of capital wasted on Client retention in this department is staggering. Private jets for domestic flights, 5-star hotels for conferences that could be emails, and let's not forget the legal fees for settling HR disputes. She turned to look at Marcus. We found 3 settled harassment complaints in the last 2 years. Sealed, of course, but Vanguard has very good lawyers. We unsealed them. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Those were misunderstandings, nuisance lawsuits. We settled to save the company time. You settled to save your reputation, Thor corrected him. But that brings me to the core of the acquisition agreement. Gentlemen, turn your binders to page 42, clause 14b. The sound of rustling paper filled the room. Marcus flipped his binder open frantically. His hands were shaking so hard he nearly tore the page. Clause 14b, Thor read aloud, her voice ringing with authority. The Ethical Leadership Retention Protocol. Vanguard Holdings reserves the right to immediately terminate, without severance or benefits, any executive found to be in violation of the company's moral code, including but not limited to fraud, embezzlement, and conduct unbecoming of a leader that endangers the brand's reputation. This is standard boilerplate, Marcus scoffed, though his voice was thin. Every contract has this. Usually, yes, Thor said, walking back to her chair and leaning over it, her knuckles white as she gripped the leather. But usually, the acquiring company doesn't have evidence of a violation before the ink is even dry. We do. She signaled to Julian, her COO, who was standing quietly in the corner. Julian tapped his tablet. A voice filled the room. It was crisp, clear, and unmistakably Marcus's. I left her crying in the kitchen. She's dead weight, Jess. Once the check clears and the promotion is signed, I'm filing the papers. I just need to make sure I secure the assets first. She's too stupid to understand a prenup anyway. The recording continued. Survival of the fittest. And right now, I'm the apex predator. The silence that followed was deafening. The board members looked at Marcus with a mixture of shock and disgust. Mr. Henderson looked like he was going to be sick. Marcus stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. This is illegal. You recorded a private conversation. That's inadmissible. Actually, Thor said calmly, you were in the company elevator. The placard by the buttons clearly states that audio and video surveillance is in use for security purposes. You consented to being recorded the moment you stepped into the building. She looked him up and down, her gaze withering. You called your wife, me, dead weight. You called me stupid. You planned to steal half of my assets after I supported you for 3 years. Tell me, Marcus, does that sound like ethical leadership to you? This is personal, Marcus shouted, pointing a trembling finger at her. Gentlemen, look at her. She's doing this because she's a scorned woman. She's vindictive. You can't let her tank this deal because of a marital dispute. I am the best asset this company has. You are a liability, Thor said, and the deal is still on the table. But there is a condition. She turned to the board. I will sign the check for $840 million today. I will acquire Novus Tech. The stock price will triple. Everyone in this room will be very, very rich. She paused for effect. Everyone, except him. She pointed at Marcus. The condition of the sale is the immediate activation of Clause 14b. Marcus Sterling is to be terminated for cause, effective immediately. If he stays, Vanguard walks, and I will publicly announce that Novus condones embezzlement and harassment, tanking your stock price to 0 by tomorrow morning. She looked at Mr. Henderson. It's him or the money, Bob. Choose. Mr. Henderson didn't hesitate. He didn't even look at his fellow board members for a vote. The choice between protecting a loudmouth sales VP and securing an $840 million payout was the easiest decision of his life. Marcus, Henderson said, his voice flat. Pack your things. You can't do this, Marcus screamed, slamming his fist onto the table. I built this department. I am Novus Tech. You think this housewife can run things? She doesn't know the first thing about this industry. She's spent the last 3 years changing diapers and watching soap operas. He turned on Thor, his eyes wild with panic and rage. The veneer of the sophisticated businessman was completely gone. He was a cornered animal. You think you've won? He spat at her. You're nothing without me. Who kept the lights on while you were playing start-up in the garage? Me. I gave you a life. You owe me. I owe you nothing but a divorce lawyer's bill, Thor replied, her voice dangerously calm. And as for not knowing the industry, who do you think bought your biggest competitor last year? Who do you think engineered the algorithm Novus uses for data mining? That was me, Marcus. I wrote the code while you were asleep. I bought the competitor under a shell company. I have been running circles around you for years, and you were too busy looking in the mirror to notice. Marcus looked around the room, desperate for an ally. His eyes landed on Jessica. Jess, he pleaded, tell them. Tell them about the work we've done. Tell them about the Miami accounts. We're a team. Jessica Thorne slowly stood up. She looked at Marcus, then at Thor. She saw the power dynamic clearly. Marcus was a sinking stone. Thor was the ocean. Mr. Sterling, Jessica said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. I have no idea what Miami accounts you're referring to. But if you're talking about the accounts you asked me to falsify last week to hide the losses in the Asia sector, I kept the emails where you ordered me to do it. Marcus gasped. You traitorous little. I was afraid for my job, Jessica said, turning to Mr. Henderson with wide, innocent eyes. He threatened to fire me if I didn't cook the books. I have all the documentation on my laptop. You liar! Marcus lunged toward her. Security! Thor's voice cracked through the air like a whip. 2 large men in dark suits, who had been waiting just outside the doors, burst into the room. They grabbed Marcus by the arms before he could reach Jessica. Get your hands off me, Marcus thrashed, his face purple. Do you know who I am? I am the VP of Sales. Not anymore, Thor said. She walked around the table until she was standing right in front of him. She signaled the guards to hold him still. She looked him in the eye. The man who had belittled her that morning, who had called her fat and useless, was now held restrained like a common criminal. You called me useless, Thor said softly, so only he could hear. You said I was an embarrassment. But look at us now, Marcus. I'm about to close the biggest deal of the decade. And you're unemployed, you're about to be investigated for fraud, and you're going to lose everything. Thor, please, Marcus whimpered, the fight suddenly draining out of him as the reality hit. Please, think about Lily. Think about our family. Don't do this. I am thinking about Lily, Thor said coldly. I'm ensuring she doesn't grow up thinking it's normal for a man to treat a woman like trash. I'm setting an example. She reached out and straightened his crooked tie one last time. Get him out of my building. The guards dragged Marcus toward the door. He kicked and screamed, shouting obscenities, begging, threatening to sue. But no one moved to help him. The board members simply watched, relieved that the cancer was being excised. As the door slammed shut behind him, silence returned to the conference room. Thor took a deep breath. She smoothed her blazer. She walked back to the head of the table and picked up the gold fountain pen sitting next to the contract. Now, she said, looking at the stunned board members with a professional smile, I believe we have a merger to finalize. Who has a pen? Mr. Henderson scrambled to offer his own. "Right here, Miss Vance, right here." Thor signed her name, Thor Vance, with a flourish. "Gentlemen," she said, closing the folder. "Welcome to Vanguard. Things are going to be different around here, starting with the coffee. It's terrible." She turned to Jessica, who was still standing, looking terrified. "Ms. Thorne," Thor said. Yes, ma'am," Jessica squeaked. "Pack your things," Thor said. Jessica's face fell. "But I helped you. I told the truth." "You told the truth when it was convenient," Thor said, her eyes hard. "You helped him lie for months. You helped him spend my money. Betrayal is a habit, Jessica, and I don't hire people with bad habits. You'll receive 2 weeks' severance for your honesty today. That's more than you deserve. Get out." Jessica burst into tears and ran out of the room. Thor looked out the window at the city skyline. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. She felt lighter than she had in years. The dead weight was gone. Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside Novus Tech, the rain soaking through his bespoke Italian suit. He watched as the security guards dusted off their hands, looking at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. He wasn't just fired, he was exiled. "You can't do this," he screamed at the glass doors, though he knew Thor couldn't hear him. She was 20 floors up, probably sipping champagne and laughing at him. He patted his pockets. He still had his car keys, the Porsche, his sanctuary. "Fine," he muttered, wiping rain from his eyes. "I'll go home. I'll lawyer up. She thinks she can steal my house. She thinks she can lock me out of my own accounts. I'll drag her through court until she's broke." He ran to the parking garage, his mind racing with revenge fantasies. He would claim emotional distress. He would claim she defrauded him. He would take half of Vanguard Holdings. He reached the spot reserved for VP of Sales. The Porsche Macan was there, but so was a massive tow truck. A burly man in a reflective vest was hooking chains to the front axle of the SUV. "Hey, hey!" Marcus sprinted over, waving his arms. "Get away from my car! What the hell are you doing?" The driver didn't even look up. "Repo order. Bank called it in about 20 minutes ago. Lease has been terminated due to... Let's see here." He checked a clipboard. "Insolvency and investigation of fraud." "Fraud?" Marcus choked. "I haven't been convicted of anything. This is a mistake. My wife owns the company." "Look, buddy." The driver spat a wad of gum onto the concrete. "The order came from the leasing company. The guarantor on the lease pulled their backing. That means you got no credit. Step aside or I call the cops." Marcus watched in horror as the car, the symbol of his status, the machine he loved more than his own child, was hoisted into the air. "How am I supposed to get home?" Marcus yelled. "Uber's cheap," the driver shrugged, climbing into the cab. 2 hours later, Marcus arrived at his suburban home in a yellow taxi that smelled of stale cigarettes. He had to pay with the crumpled cash in his pocket because his credit card had been declined twice during the ride. He stomped up the driveway. He just wanted a shower. He wanted a scotch. He wanted to scream at Thor until she apologized. He jammed his key into the front door lock. It didn't turn. He jiggled it. Nothing. He tried to force it. The lock was solid. "What the?" He stepped back and looked at the house. The blinds were drawn. It looked dark, empty. "Thor!" he shouted, pounding on the door. "Open this door right now! I know you're in there!" "She's not!" a deep voice said from behind him. Marcus spun around. A man in a sharp black suit was standing on the lawn, holding a thick manila envelope. It wasn't Julian. It was a process server. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded. "Get off my property." "It's not your property, Mr. Sterling," the man said calmly. "It never was." I paid the mortgage on this house for 3 years, Marcus lied. My name is on the deed. The man handed him the envelope. Actually, if you check the deed, the house is owned by the Lily Trust, a holding company managed by Vanguard. You were listed as a permitted occupant. As of 11 a.m. today, that permission has been revoked. Marcus ripped the envelope open. Inside was a restraining order, divorce papers, and a notice of eviction. This is insane, Marcus whispered, his hands shaking. I live here. My clothes are in there. My watch collection. Your personal effects have been boxed and placed in the storage unit on Route 9, the man said, pointing to a key taped to the paperwork. Except for the items purchased with the company credit card. Those have been seized as evidence for the forensic audit. Evidence? For the embezzlement trial, the man clarified. Ms. Vance is pressing charges, grand larceny, falsifying business records. It's quite a list, Marcus. If I were you, I wouldn't worry about where you're sleeping tonight. I'd worry about finding a lawyer who accepts pro bono cases, because all your joint accounts have been frozen. Marcus looked at the house one last time. It was the only thing he had left. And now, he realized, he had been a squatter in his own life. Thor had owned the roof over his head, the car he drove, and the job he worked, and he had called her useless. The rain started up again, a cold, miserable drizzle. Where is she? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Where is my daughter? Ms. Vance and her daughter are currently en route to their primary residence, the man said, checking his watch. Primary residence? This is our primary residence. The man allowed a small, pitying smile to cross his face. Oh no, Mr. Sterling. This was just the place she kept to see if you could be a decent husband. Miss Vance lives in the penthouse at the Four Seasons. She's gone home. The man turned and walked to his car, leaving Marcus standing on the wet lawn, holding a bag of legal papers with nowhere to go. He pulled out his phone to call Jessica. She was the only one left. The number you have reached has been disconnected. He lowered the phone. He was alone. The morning sun gleamed off the glass skyscrapers of downtown Seattle. In the lobby of Vanguard Holdings, a massive 4K screen displayed the cover of Forbes magazine. The headline read, "The Titan of Tech, How Thor Vance Turned Betrayal into Billions." On the cover, Thor looked radiant. She was wearing a white power suit, her hair cascading over her shoulders, holding the hand of a 3-year-old girl who looked just like her. She didn't look tired. She didn't look fat. She looked like a queen. Inside the building, Thor walked through the bustling trading floor. Employees stopped to nod respectfully. She wasn't feared like a tyrant. She was respected like a general. "Julian," she said, stopping by her COO's desk. "How are the Q3 numbers for the Novus division?" "Up 40% since the restructuring," Julian smiled. "Since we fired the old management and stopped the client dinners, productivity has skyrocketed. The new sales VP is a woman named Sarah, single mum, works harder than anyone I've ever seen." "Good," Thor nodded. "Give her a raise and send a bonus to her kids' college fund." "Will do. Oh, and Thor?" Julian hesitated. "We got a letter from him." Thor's expression didn't change. "Marcus? He's asking for a settlement again. He says the legal fees are drowning him. He's offering to sign away his parental rights if you drop the fraud charges." Thor took the letter. She didn't open it. She walked over to the shredder and fed it through. The machine whirred, turning Marcus's desperate plea into confetti. "He doesn't get to bargain," Thor said softly. "He made his bed. Now he has to lie in it. Or in his case, sleep on his brother's couch." "Understood," Julian said. "I'll tell the lawyers to proceed with the trial." Thor looked out the window. She felt a twinge of sadness, not for Marcus, but for the time she had wasted trying to be small so he could feel big. She had learned her lesson. Never shrink yourself for someone who refuses to grow. Meanwhile, 10 blocks away, the lunch rush at Burger Barn was in full swing. The smell of grease was overwhelming. "Order 42, double cheeseburger, no pickles." Marcus Sterling wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He was wearing a paper hat and a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too small. His face was gaunt, his eyes surrounded by dark circles. "I said no pickles!" The customer, a teenager in a varsity jacket, yelled at him. "Can't you read, old man?" "I'm sorry, sir," Marcus mumbled, his voice hoarse. "I'll fix it." He took the tray back, scraping the pickles off with a plastic fork. A year ago, he was ordering bottles of Dom Perignon at Le Bernardin. A year ago, he was telling his wife she was an embarrassment. Now, he was living in a studio apartment above a bowling alley. His friends from the old days had blocked his number the moment the scandal broke. Jessica was gone. Rumor had it she moved to LA to find a new sugar daddy, and no reputable company would hire him with an active embezzlement investigation hanging over his head. He handed the tray back to the teenager. "Hey, look at the TV!" the kid shouted to his friends. Marcus looked up at the screen, mounted in the corner of the restaurant. It was a news segment on CNBC. And today, stock in Vanguard Holdings hit an all-time high following the announcement of their new philanthropic initiative, the anchor said. CIO Thor Vance was quoted saying, "Success is the best revenge, but happiness is the best success." The camera zoomed in on Thor. She was laughing, looking straight into the lens. Marcus stared at the screen. He remembered that laugh. He used to hear it every day. He used to own the heart of the woman who owned the world. "Hey, buddy!" the manager shouted from the back. "Stop daydreaming! The fryer is beeping! Move it!" Marcus flinched. He looked at the screen one last time, then looked down at his greasy hands. "Yes, boss," he whispered. "I'm moving." He turned back to the fryer, the heat blasting him in the face, as the woman he called useless continued to conquer the world without him. Marcus Sterling learned the hard way that you should never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book holds the deed to your house and the keys to your future. He mistook Thor's silence for weakness and her kindness for stupidity. He thought he was the king of the castle, only to find out he was just the jester. In the end, Thor didn't just take his job, she took his dignity, leaving him with nothing but the memory of the incredible life he threw away with both hands. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve his fate, or was Thor too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and revenge, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs some drama, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog takes it all. Thanks for watching. He looked at her with cold, dead eyes and said, "You don't fit in my world anymore, Adele. I need someone who looks the part." James thought he had won the game of life. He had the looks, the top executive job at the city's biggest conglomerate, and a stunning new mistress on his arm. He thought dragging his dowdy ex-wife through a divorce would be the final step in his ascent to power. But James made a fatal calculation. He didn't know that the world he was so desperate to join actually belonged to the woman he just threw away. Tonight, at the Sapphire Gala, the doors are going to open, and James is about to learn that the quiet woman he underestimated holds the keys to his destruction. This is the story of ultimate regret. The sound of the fountain pen scratching against the paper was the only noise in the expansive, sterile boardroom of Sterling Vance International. James Thorne signed his name with a flourish. the expensive gold nib of his Mont Blanc pen catching the light. He didn't look up. He simply slid the divorce papers across the mahogany table toward the woman sitting opposite him. "It's generous, Adele," James said, his voice smooth, lacking any trace of the 7 years they had spent together. "The alimony is more than enough for you to move back to, wherever it is you're comfortable. Maybe back to Idaho? Or was it Ohio? I never could remember." Adele sat quietly. She wore a simple grey cardigan and no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a loose, somewhat messy bun. To the outside world, she looked like exactly what James said she was, a plain, unambitious housewife who had ridden the coattails of a rising star. She picked up the papers. Her hands didn't tremble. "It's Iowa, James," she said softly, "and I don't want the alimony. I just want the dog." James laughed, a short, barking sound of disbelief. "The dog? That mutt? Fine. Take it. I'm doing a full remodel of the penthouse anyway. Jessica is allergic to dog hair." The name hung in the air like toxic smoke. "Jessica." Adele looked up, her green eyes unreadable. "So, you're moving her in already? The ink isn't even dry, James." James stood up, adjusting his bespoke Italian suit. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. He felt like a titan. At 32, he was the regional director of Sterling Vance, the most powerful logistics and tech conglomerate in the Northern Hemisphere. "Let's be real, Adele," James said, looking at his reflection rather than her. "We've been over for years. You're simple. You like gardening and reading paperbacks. I'm about to become the youngest CEO in the company's history once Old Man Sterling retires next month. I need a partner who can walk a red carpet, not someone who worries about composting." He turned back to her, a sneer curling his lip. "Tomorrow is the Sapphire Gala. It's the night the board announces the new successor. I'm taking Jessica. She's a model, Adele. She speaks 3 languages. She fits the image. You were a placeholder." It was a cruel, unnecessary strike. Adele stood up slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at him with an expression that James mistook for defeat, but was actually pity. "You think image is everything, James," she whispered. "You've spent so much time climbing the ladder, you never bothered to check who owns the wall it's leaning against." "Spare me the cryptic fortune cookie nonsense," James waved his hand dismissively. "Sign the papers. Get out. Security will escort you." Adele signed. She left the ring on the table, a modest diamond he had bought her when he was a nobody. She walked out of the glass doors, her posture straight, her stride silent. James grabbed the ring and tossed it into the trash bin. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Jessica, baby, it's done. She's gone. Get ready. Tomorrow night, we rule the city." But as James stared out at the city lights, he had no idea that the simple woman who just left the building wasn't going back to a small apartment. She was getting into a black town car, waiting 3 blocks away, occupied by the most powerful legal team in New York. Adele sat in the back of the armored Cadillac Escalade, finally allowing a single tear to roll down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of heartbreak. It was a tear of mourning for the man James used to be. "Are you okay, Miss Vance?" the driver asked, looking in the rearview mirror. It was Thomas, her father's head of security, a man who had known her since she was 6. "I'm fine, Thomas," Adele said, her voice changing. The softness evaporated, replaced by a steely, educated cadence. "Did you bring the file?" "On the seat beside you, Ma'am." Adele opened the leather folder. Inside was the quarterly audit of Sterling Vance International. The world knew her as Adele Thorne, the quiet housewife. But her birth name was Adele Sterling Vance. She was the only daughter of Arthur Sterling, the billionaire founder of the company James worked for. 7 years ago, she had wanted to escape the shadow of her father's empire. She wanted to know if someone could love her for her, not her billions. She had met James in a coffee shop. He was struggling, ambitious, and seemingly kind. She had used her mother's maiden name, Vance, and pretended to be a freelance editor. She had fallen in love. She had married him. And from the shadows, she had paved his road to success. Every promotion James got, Adele had whispered to her father to look at his file. Every major deal James closed. Adele had secretly advised him on the strategy, playing it off as intuition over dinner. She had built him, and he had just discarded her because he thought she wasn't elite enough. Her phone buzzed. It was a private number. "Hi, Dad," Adele answered. "Did he sign?" Arthur Sterling's voice was a low rumble. He was a man who could crash stock markets with a frown, but he had a soft spot for his daughter. "He did," Adele said. "He let me keep the dog." "The fool," Arthur grunted. "Does he know?" "No. He thinks I'm moving to Iowa. He told me I don't fit his world." "His world?" Arthur let out a dry, terrifying laugh. "He's living in a cardboard box inside your world, honey. Listen, I'm tired of this charade. The board is expecting the announcement tomorrow. I was going to give him the CEO spot because you asked me to, despite his arrogance. But now?" "Now," Adele said, closing the file. "We go with Plan B." "And what is Plan B?" Adele looked out the window as the car passed a billboard featuring one of James's recent ad campaigns. "Plan B is that I stop hiding. He wants a woman who can walk the red carpet. He wants someone who commands respect. I'll show him exactly what that looks like." "You're coming to the gala," Arthur said, delight in his voice. "I'm not just coming, Dad. I'm hosting it. It's time the placeholder took her proper seat at the table. Make sure security knows not to let James in through the VIP entrance. If he wants to be elite, let's see if he can survive the Shark Tank without me holding his hand." "And the mistress?" Arthur asked. "Let her come," Adele said coldly. "I need a witness." She hung up. She pulled the pins out of her hair, letting the golden waves fall over her shoulders. She wiped the modest lipstick off her face. The simple housewife was dead. The heiress had returned. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was transformed into a shimmering ocean of blue and silver. This was the Sapphire Gala, the most exclusive corporate event of the year. Senators, tech moguls, and A-list celebrities mingled under chandeliers that cost more than most houses. At 7:30 p.m., a sleek red Ferrari pulled up to the valet. James stepped out, looking every bit the movie star. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo, custom-made on Savile Row. On his arm was Jessica. Jessica was undeniably beautiful, in a loud, flashy way. She wore a dress that was cut too low and slit too high, covered in sequins that caught the light aggressively. She was 23, a chaotic mix of ambition and naivety. "Oh my God, James," she squealed, snapping a selfie with the red carpet in the background. "Look at this place. We are totally the hottest couple here." "Act like you belong, Jess," James muttered, checking his reflection in the car window. "Tonight is about power. I need to find Arthur Sterling. Once I shake his hand, the CEO position is mine." They walked up the stairs. James handed his invite to the doorman with a smirk. "James Thorne, Regional Director, +1. The doorman, an older man with white gloves, scanned the list. He paused. He frowned. "Is there a problem?" James asked, his patience instantly fraying. "Mr. Thorne, yes, you're not on the VIP list." James felt a flush of heat on his neck. "Excuse me. I'm the keynote speaker's favorite for the new role. Check again." "I have you on the general admission list, sir," the doorman said, politely but firmly. "Side entrance, please. The main doors are reserved for board members and the Sterling family." Jessica giggled nervously. "James, that's embarrassing. Why are we in the cheap line?" "It's a clerical error," James hissed, grabbing her arm tightly. "Come on. I'll fire this guy tomorrow." They walked around to the side entrance, squeezing past mid-level managers and suppliers. James was fuming. This wasn't how his coronation was supposed to begin. Once inside, however, his confidence returned. The room was spectacular. Waiters circulated with glasses of Dom Perignon. James spotted Julian, the CFO of the company. He steered Jessica toward him. "Julian, good to see you," James beamed, extending a hand. Julian, a man in his 50s who knew where the bodies were buried, looked at James with a strange expression. It was a mix of confusion and second-hand embarrassment. "James," Julian nodded, not taking the hand. "I didn't think you'd be here tonight, considering." "Considering what?" James laughed. "The divorce? Old news, Julian. Dead weight is gone. Meet Jessica." Jessica waved, her gum chewing, slightly audible. "Hi, love your tie." Julian looked at Jessica, then back to James. "Right. Well, enjoy the evening, James. It's going to be memorable." Julian hurried away. "Weird guy," Jessica said, grabbing a champagne flute. "He's just jealous," James said, scanning the room. "Where is Arthur Sterling? The old man usually makes an entrance by now." The lights in the ballroom suddenly dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. The room went silent. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of Sterling Vance International, Mr. Arthur Sterling." The crowd erupted in applause. James clapped harder than anyone, whispering to Jessica, "Watch this. He's going to call me up in 10 minutes. Arthur Sterling walked onto the stage. He was 70, but he moved with the vigor of a boxer. He adjusted the microphone. "Thank you," Arthur said. "Tonight is a night of change. For 40 years I have steered this ship. But the time has come for new blood. New vision." James nudged Jessica. "Here it comes." "But before I announce the new CAO," Arthur continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, landing briefly on the back corner where James stood, "I want to introduce you to the person who has actually been running the strategy of this company from the shadows for the last 5 years. The person who designed the Asia acquisition. The person who saved us from the tech bubble crash." James frowned. He had executed the Asia acquisition, but he hadn't designed it. He remembered bringing the paperwork home and complaining about it, and Adele staying up all night fixing the numbers. "Please welcome," Arthur's voice boomed, "my daughter and the majority shareholder of Sterling Vance, Ms. Adele Sterling Vance." The double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. James dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, splashing onto Jessica's shoes, but he didn't notice. At the top of the stairs stood a woman. She wasn't wearing a grey cardigan. She was wearing a custom emerald green gown that hugged every curve, dripping in diamonds that made Jessica's sequins look like plastic. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of gold. Her makeup was sharp, fierce, and perfect. It was Adele, and she was looking directly at him. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered the gentle clinking of silverware and the murmur of polite conversation. Every eye was fixed on the staircase, but none were as wide or as terrified as James Thorne's. Adele descended the marble steps with the grace of a queen, returning to claim a stolen throne. The emerald silk of her gown flowed around her like liquid money, the slit in the skirt revealing legs that James had ignored for years, now accentuated by strappy diamond heels that cost more than his car. But it wasn't the dress, or the jewels, or the hair. It was her eyes. They were scanning the crowd, cool and predatory. When they locked onto James, she didn't flinch. She didn't look away in shame as she usually did when he criticized her outfit or her cooking. She held his gaze, and for the first time in his life, James felt small. He felt like an insect under a magnifying glass, about to be burned. "James!" Jessica tugged on his sleeve, her voice shrill and confused. "James! Isn't that your ex-wife? The one from the cornfields?" James couldn't speak. His throat felt like it was filled with sawdust. He tried to formulate a sentence, a rational explanation, but his brain was short-circuiting. Adele? A Sterling? It's impossible. He replayed their entire marriage in his head in the span of a second. The way she never talked about her family. The way she smiled vaguely when he bragged about meeting the big boss, Arthur Sterling. The way she always urged him to sign prenuptial agreements that kept their assets separate. She wasn't protecting my money, he realized with a sick lurch of his stomach. She was protecting hers. Adele reached the bottom of the stairs. Arthur Sterling, the man James had spent 5 years trying to impress, walked over to her. He didn't shake her hand. He kissed her on the cheek and offered her his arm. The affection was genuine, warm, a stark contrast to the terrifying, icy demeanor Arthur usually showed his employees. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur said, his voice amplified by the microphone. "I apologize for the deception over the years. My daughter wished to make her own way in the world, to understand life without the filter of extreme wealth. She wanted to know who she could trust. And tonight, I believe she has her answer." A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. People turned to look at James. He could feel their eyes, judging, laughing, pitying. "No," James whispered. The denial was rising in him, a desperate, clawing thing. "This is a joke. It's a prank." He dropped Jessica's arm. "Stay here." "Where are you going?" Jessica hissed, grabbing his bicep. "Everyone is looking at us, James. You have champagne on your shoes." "Shut up!" James snapped, shoving her hand away. He began to push through the crowd. He had to get to the stage. He had to fix this. He was James Thorne. He was the golden boy. He could charm his way out of anything. If Adele was a Sterling, that meant he was a Sterling by marriage. Technically, the divorce papers were signed, but were they filed? Maybe he could claim duress. Maybe he could win her back right now. He elbowed past a senator and a tech billionaire. "Excuse me, coming through, family business." He reached the edge of the low stage just as Adele took the microphone from her father. She looked out at the sea of faces, her expression serene. "Thank you, Father," she said. Her voice was different, too. Gone was the soft, apologetic tone she used at home. This voice was trained, resonant, commanding. "It is a pleasure to finally introduce myself properly. For 7 years I have lived among you as Adele Thorne. I have watched how this company operates from the ground floor up. I have seen who works for the good of the firm and who works only for the good of their own ego." James scrambled up the side steps of the stage. A security guard moved to intercept him, but Adele held up a hand. "It's all right, Thomas," she said into the mic. "Let him come." James stumbled onto center stage, the bright lights blinding him. He looked deranged next to her perfection, sweaty, red-faced, with wine stains on his shoes. "Adele!" he panted, forcing a smile that looked more like a rictus of terror. He reached for her hand, but she took a smooth step back. "James," she said, her voice amplified through the ballroom. "You're interrupting my speech." "Baby, please," James said, lowering his voice, trying to create an intimate bubble in front of 500 people. "What is this? Why didn't you tell me? We're husband and wife. We're a team. I I didn't mean what I said yesterday. The stress of the promotion. You know how I get." Adele looked at him with an expression of mild curiosity, as if he were a particularly interesting bacteria in a petri dish. She didn't turn the microphone away. Every word was being broadcast. "You didn't mean it?" Adele asked, raising an eyebrow. "You didn't mean that I was plain? That I was a placeholder? That I didn't fit in your world?" The crowd gasped. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. "I was angry," James pleaded, sweating profusely now. "Adele, look at us. Think about what we can do. You're a Sterling. I'm the regional director. Together we can rule this city. I love you, Adele. You know I love you." "You love me?" Adele repeated. She turned to the audience. "He says he loves me." Then she pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the room, directly at the red-faced girl in the sequined dress standing by the buffet. "Then who is Jessica?" The spotlight swung violently across the room, landing on Jessica. She froze, a shrimp canapé halfway to her mouth. She looked like a deer in headlights. "That's," James stammered. She's an intern. I was mentoring her." "Mentoring her?" Adele laughed, and it was a cold, sharp sound. "James, you moved her into our penthouse 3 hours ago. You threw my dog's bed in the trash to make room for her yoga mat." The crowd erupted. Laughter, shock, booing. It was a coliseum, and James was the gladiator with no sword. "Adele, let's talk about this in private," James hissed, his charm failing, his anger surfacing. "You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing the company." "I am the company, James," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "And you are trespassing." James stiffened. "I work here. I am the top executive in this room." "Are you?" Adele turned to her father. "Dad, did we sign the Q4 personnel restructuring forms?" Arthur Sterling stepped forward, pulling a document from his tuxedo jacket pocket. "I have them right here." "Excellent," Adele said. She looked back at James. "You see, James, tonight isn't just a gala. It's a performance review, and I'm afraid you've failed." James felt the floor tilting beneath him. "What are you talking about?" "You think you earned your success," Adele said, stepping closer to him, her heels clicking on the stage. "But let's look at the record. The logistics deal of 2023. You wanted to buy the fleet. I told you to lease the shipping containers. You saved $40 million because I did the math while you were playing golf." James's face went pale. "That's private spousal conversation." "The merger with Omnicorp?" Adele continued, relentless. "You wanted to settle for 12%. I told you to hold out for 18% because I knew, from my father, that they were desperate. I wrote your negotiation script, James. I typed it out for you while you were tired and watching football." "Stop it," James whispered. "Every major success you have had in the last 5 years was me," Adele announced to the room. "I was the architect. You were just the face. And frankly, the face has become tired." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. "There is a rumor that tonight a new CEO would be announced. That rumor is true." James puffed out his chest. Despite everything, a tiny, delusional part of him thought, maybe she'll still give it to me, to keep me close. She needs me. "The board and I have voted," Adele said. "The new CEO of Sterling Vance International is me." The applause was deafening, a standing ovation. James stood there, his hands hanging limp at his sides, watching his wife, his ex-wife, accept the adoration that he believed was his birthright. But Adele wasn't done. She raised a hand for silence. "However," she said, looking at James, "we have a vacancy for regional director. Since Mr. Thorne has demonstrated a lack of judgment, integrity, and basic intelligence, He is hereby relieved of his duties, effective immediately." "You can't fire me," James screamed, his voice cracking. "I have a contract. I have a severance package. I'll sue you for everything you're worth." Adele smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who has already eaten the sheep. "Oh, James," she sighed. "You really should have read the divorce papers before you signed them yesterday. Specifically, page 42, paragraph C. The mention of page 42 hung in the air like a guillotine blade. James stared at her. "What?" "You were so eager to get rid of me," Adele explained, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room where the press photographers were now flashing their cameras like a lightning storm. "You were so desperate to clear the decks for Jessica that you didn't read the non-compete and conduct clause I added to the settlement." She signaled to the large screen behind the stage. The tech team, clearly prepped for this moment, projected a PDF of the document James had signed less than 24 hours ago. There was his signature, sloppy, arrogant, rushed. "Let me read it for you," Adele said, turning to look at the screen. "In the event that the signatory, James Thorne, engages in acts of public infidelity or conduct detrimental to the reputation of the Sterling family prior to the finalization of the decree, all severance, stock options, and bonuses are forfeited. Furthermore, the signatory acknowledges that any intellectual property or business strategies developed during the marriage remain the sole property of the spouse, Adele Sterling Vance." The room went silent. "You signed away your stocks, James," Adele said softly. "You signed away your bonus. You even signed away the rights to the projects you claimed were yours. You have nothing. You leave this company with exactly what you brought into this marriage: your ego and a cheap suit." James felt his knees give way. He actually staggered. This is entrapment." "It's business," Adele corrected him. "You always said business was about survival of the fittest. You just didn't realize you were the prey." She turned to the security guards. "Thomas, please escort Mr. Thorne off the premises and take his company phone and car keys. Those are Sterling Vance property." Thomas, the burly driver who had comforted Adele earlier that day, stepped onto the stage. He didn't look like a driver anymore. He looked like an enforcer. He grabbed James by the arm, not gently. "Let go of me," James shouted, thrashing. "I'm a VIP. I'm the director." "Move, Mr. Thorne," Thomas grunted, dragging him toward the stairs. As James was hauled down the steps, stumbling and nearly falling, he looked frantically into the crowd for an ally. He saw Julian, the CFO. "Julian, do something. Tell them how much money I made for this company." Julian took a sip of his champagne and deliberately turned his back on James, striking up a conversation with a potted plant. James scanned the room for Jessica. "Jessica will stand by me," he thought desperately. "She loves me. We have a connection." He spotted her near the exit. She was frantically typing on her phone. As James was dragged closer, she looked up. "Jess!" James yelled. "Jess, call a lawyer! Get the car!" Jessica looked at James, sweaty, disgraced, fired, and broke. Then she looked up at Adele on the stage, powerful, rich, and triumphant. Jessica put her phone in her purse. She didn't step forward. She stepped back. "I don't think so, James," she said, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "You told me you were the CEO. You told me she was crazy. I don't date liars or losers." She turned on her heel and walked out the door, the sequins on her dress flashing like a warning sign. "Jessica!" James screamed. The humiliation was total. The security guards didn't drag him out the side door this time. They marched him right down the center aisle, past the rows of people he had sneered at for years. He saw the faces of secretaries he had yelled at, junior associates he had stolen credit from, and rivals he had mocked. They were all smiling. Some were even recording with their phones. Thomas shoved James through the main doors of the Pierre Hotel and onto the cold pavement of Fifth Avenue. "My coat!" James sputtered, shivering in the night air. "I left my coat at the coat check." "Consider it a donation to the foundation," Thomas said, standing in the doorway like a bouncer at the gates of heaven. "And Mr. Thorne?" James looked up, tears of rage and shock stinging his eyes. "If you ever come near Miss Adele or the Sterling building again," Thomas said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper, "I won't be calling the police. I'll be handling it personally. Do you understand?" James nodded, terrified. Thomas reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, crumpled object and tossed it at James. It landed in a puddle at his feet. It was the Mont Blanc pen James had used to sign the divorce papers. "You might need this to fill out unemployment forms," Thomas said. The heavy glass doors slammed shut. James Thorne stood alone on the sidewalk. The gala was raging inside. He could hear the music and the applause for his wife. His Ferrari was parked with the valet, but he realized with a sinking heart that he didn't have the ticket, or the keys, or the money to pay the valet. He had nothing. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted from shock to celebration. The dead weight had been cut loose, and the true leader had emerged. Adele stood on the stage, her hand trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kid," Arthur whispered. "You did good." Adele looked out at the crowd. She saw respect. She saw awe, but she felt a strange hollowness. Revenge, she realized, was a dish best served cold, but it didn't fill you up. She took the microphone one last time. "Thank you," she said. "Now let's get to work. We have a lot of cleaning up to do." As the band struck up a jazz number and the waiters began serving the main course, Adele walked off the stage. She needed air. She needed a moment to breathe before the board members descended on her. She walked toward the balcony doors, signaling to Thomas that she wanted to be alone. He nodded and stood guard at the entrance. Adele stepped out onto the stone balcony overlooking Central Park. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars. She took a deep breath of the cool air, closing her eyes. It was over. The lie was over. James was gone. "Quite a show, Mrs. Thorne. Or should I say, Ms. Sterling." The voice came from the shadows of the balcony corner. It was deep, smooth, and laced with a dangerous kind of amusement. Adele spun around, her hand instinctively going to her throat. She hadn't realized anyone else was out here. A man stepped into the light. He was tall, taller than James, with broad shoulders that strained against a tuxedo that was blacker than the night. He had dark hair, a sharp jawline, covered in a day's worth of stubble, and eyes that were the color of steel. He held a lit cigarette in one hand, though he didn't seem to be smoking it. Adele recognized him instantly, and her blood ran cold. It was Gabriel the Wolf Moretti. If James was a corporate shark, Gabriel was the Leviathan. He was the head of the Moretti Syndicate, a family that ran the construction unions, the shipping docks, and half the politicians in New York. He was a man her father had strictly forbidden her to ever do business with. He was dangerous. He was lethal. And he was currently smiling at her. "Mr. Moretti," Adele said, her voice steady despite her heart hammering against her ribs. "This is a private party. I don't believe you were on the guest list." "I don't do lists, Bella," Gabriel said, taking a slow step toward her. He tossed the cigarette over the balcony rail. "I came to see the coronation, and I must say, watching you dissect that poor excuse for a man was the most entertaining thing I've seen in a decade." "What do you want?" Adele asked, backing up until her waist hit the stone railing. Gabriel stopped. He was close enough that she could smell him. Expensive scotch, tobacco, and gunpowder. "I want to make a deal," Gabriel said. "We don't do business with criminals," Adele shot back. Gabriel laughed. "Everyone is a criminal, Adele. Some of us just have better tailors. Besides, with your ex-husband gone, you have a vacancy in your logistics department, and I control the docks. You need me." "I don't need anyone," Adele said defiantly. Gabriel leaned in, his face inches from hers. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "You needed a husband who could see you," Gabriel whispered. "James was blind. But I see you, Adele. I saw the fire in you tonight. And I think you and I could burn this whole city down together." Adele felt a flush of heat that had nothing to do with anger. This was dangerous. This was wrong. This was exactly the kind of trouble she should run from. But as she looked into the predator's eyes, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to run. The air on the balcony seemed to vibrate with tension. Adele stared at Gabriel Moretti, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Logic screamed at her to run. This man was a predator, a kingpin whose name was whispered in fear across the 5 boroughs. But instinct, a dark, dormant instinct that had awakened the moment she humiliated James, told her to stay. "You're proposing an alliance," Adele said, her voice steady, though her hands gripped the cold stone railing behind her. "Sterling Vance operates in the light, Mr. Moretti. You operate in the shadows. Oil and water don't mix." Gabriel took a step closer, invading her personal space with deliberate arrogance. He smelled of danger and expensive cologne. "The shipping industry isn't oil and water, Adele. It's blood and money. You know this. Your father knew this. Why do you think your trucks never get hijacked? Why do you think your containers never sit in customs for weeks?" Adele's eyes widened. "My father paid you?" "Your father paid tribute," Gabriel corrected smoothly. "A protection fee. But Arthur is old. He's retiring. The wolves are circling, Adele. Without your your ex-husband, you look vulnerable to the market. You need a new dog at the gate, and I'm offering to be the wolf." "And what is the price?" Adele asked, narrowing her eyes. "Because I know you don't do charity." Gabriel smiled, a slow, predatory grin that made her knees weak. "I want legitimacy. I have billions in dirty money, Adele. I need clean ventures. I want a seat on the board. Silent, of course. But equity." "You want to launder money through my company?" Adele accused him. "I want to invest in our future," Gabriel countered. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of golden hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, callous, contrasting with the softness of her skin. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through her that was terrifyingly pleasant. "Think about it. James is out there right now. A wounded animal is dangerous. He knows your secrets. He knows your passwords. Who is going to stop him when he tries to burn you down? The police? They take 20 minutes to arrive. I take 2. Adele pulled back, her mind racing. He was right. James was petty, vindictive, and desperate. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "Don't think too long, Tesoro," Gabriel said, stepping back into the shadows. "The storm is coming." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the storm was already brewing in a cheap motel room in Queens. James Thorne sat on the edge of a stained mattress, staring at the wall. He had sold his watch, a Patek Philippe given to him by Arthur Sterling, to a pawn shop for a fraction of its value just to pay for the room and a bottle of cheap whiskey. He took a swig, the liquid burning his throat. The humiliation of the gala played on a loop in his mind. The laughter, the way Jessica had looked at him, the way Thomas had thrown him into the street. "They think they can erase me," James muttered, his eyes bloodshot and manic. "They think I'm just a placeholder." He reached into his pocket. He didn't have his company phone, but he had a burner phone he used for extracurricular activities. And more importantly, he had his memory. James had been the regional director for 5 years. He didn't know the strategy, but he knew the codes. He knew where the servers were located. He knew the dirty laundry, the offshore accounts, the tax loopholes, the sensitive client lists. He dialed a number. "Silas Grant speaking," a voice answered. Silas Grant was the CEO of Omnicorp, Sterling Vance's biggest rival. He was a ruthless corporate raider who had been trying to destroy the Sterling Empire for decades. "Mr. Grant," James said, his voice raspy. "This is James Thorne." There was a pause. "The man of the hour?" Silas chuckled darkly. "I saw the video of your exit, trending #1 on Twitter. Very dramatic. I can destroy her," James said, cutting to the chase. "I know the override codes for the automated logistics grid. I can shut down their entire supply chain for a week. I can freeze their assets. I can give you the blueprint to steal their biggest contract." "And why would you do that, James?" Silas asked. "Because I want to see her beg," James hissed, gripping the bottle until his knuckles turned white. "I want $10 million and I want a job at Omnicorp, VP level." "Meet me at the shipyard in Brooklyn," Silas said. "Warehouse 4, 1 hour. Bring the codes. If they work, you get your money." James hung up. He stood up, splashing some water on his face. He looked in the cracked mirror. He didn't see a loser. He saw a man about to get even. 1 hour later, Adele was sitting in her father's office at the headquarters, staring at the city skyline. The gala was over. The guests had gone home. But she couldn't sleep. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Adele!" Gabriel's voice came through, clear and urgent. "You have a breach." "What?" Adele sat up straight. "Who is this?" "It's Gabriel. Listen to me. My men at the docks just spotted a car entering the Omnicorp sector. It's James." Adele felt a chill run down her spine. "James? What is he doing there?" "He's meeting Silas Grant," Gabriel said. "Adele, think. What does James have?" "The override codes," Adele gasped. "He never changed them because he was too lazy to memorize new ones. If he gives those to Silas, they can paralyze our fleet. It will cost us billions. It will bankrupt the company by morning." "I can stop him," Gabriel said. His voice was devoid of emotion, purely tactical. "But if I intervene, there is no going back. We are partners. You owe me." Adele hesitated for only a fraction of a second. She looked at the portrait of her father on the wall, the legacy he built from nothing. She thought of James's smug face when he served her the divorce papers. "Do it," Adele said. "Stop him." "Stay by the phone," Gabriel said. The line went dead. The Brooklyn shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and shipping containers shrouded in fog. James parked the stolen sedan he had hot-wired, a skill he learned in his rebellious youth, and walked toward Warehouse 4. 2 large men in suits were waiting for him. They frisked him, took the burner phone, and led him inside. Silas Grant was sitting on a wooden crate, flanked by 3 more bodyguards. He looked like a vulture in a tuxedo. "Mr. Thorne?" Silas smiled. "You look terrible." "Cut the small talk," James spat. "Do you have the money?" "I have a transfer ready," Silas said, tapping a tablet. "But first, the codes," James recited the sequence from memory. "Alpha 7 Tango Break 44. Authorization, M. Thorne Admin." Silas typed it in. He watched the screen. Green lights flashed. Access granted. "Incredible," Silas laughed. "We're in. I have control of the Sterling fleet. I can reroute every ship to Antarctica if I want." "The money," James demanded, extending a shaking hand. Silas looked at him with pity. "James, James, you really are an amateur. You just admitted to corporate espionage and cyber-terrorism in front of witnesses. Why would I pay you when I can just blackmail you? James's face fell. We had a deal. Deals are for equals, Silas sneered. You are a liability. Boys, get rid of him. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. The bodyguards stepped forward, cracking their knuckles. James backed away, terror seizing his throat. No, wait, I have more info. Goodbye, James, Silas said, turning his back. Suddenly, the lights in the warehouse exploded, showering the room in sparks and glass. The darkness was instant and absolute. What is this? Silas shouted. Secure the perimeter. Gunshots rang out, short, suppressed bursts. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Silas's bodyguards dropped to the floor, groaning in pain, shot in the kneecaps and shoulders, non-lethal, but incapacitating. A figure emerged from the smoke, illuminated by the headlights of the car outside. It was Gabriel Moretti. He held a suppressed pistol in one hand, relaxed at his side. Behind him stood 6 of his enforcers, armed with assault rifles. Silas, Gabriel said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. You're playing with my toys. Silas froze. He knew who Gabriel was. Everyone knew. Moretti? This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, Gabriel said, walking forward. He kicked the tablet out of Silas's hand and crushed it under his boot. You see, Sterling Vance is under my protection now. Gabriel turned his gaze to James, who was cowering behind a stack of pallets. And you? Gabriel said softly. The ex-husband. Gabriel signaled to his men. They grabbed James and dragged him into the center of the room. James was sobbing now, a mess of tears and snot. Please, James begged. I didn't mean it. I'll leave town. I'll disappear. Gabriel holstered his gun. He pulled out a phone and put it on speaker. He's secured, Donna, Gabriel said. Adele's voice filled the warehouse. Is he hurt? Only his pride, Gabriel said, and his pants are a bit wet. James looked at the phone. Adele, thank God. Save me. These people are crazy. Silas tried to kill me. I heard, James. Adele's voice was cold, harder than diamond. I've been listening for 10 minutes. What? James blinked. The burner phone you used, Adele said. Did you really think I didn't know about it? I bought that phone for you 2 years ago for your fishing trips. It has a tracker and a listening device. I knew you were going to Silas before you even left the motel. James slumped. She was always 10 steps ahead. Gabriel, Adele said, let Silas go. He knows the rules. If he tries this again, I'll buy his company and strip it for parts. Agreed, Gabriel said. He nodded to Silas, who scrambled out of the warehouse without a backward glance. And James? Gabriel asked. There was a long silence on the line. James held his breath. Bring him to the gala hall, Adele said. There is one last thing he needs to see. 30 minutes later, James was thrown through the doors of the empty Pierre Hotel ballroom. The cleaning crew was gone. The room was dark, save for one spotlight on the stage. Adele was sitting on a chair in the center of the stage. Gabriel stood behind her, a silent sentinel. But there was someone else there. Standing next to Adele, holding a tablet and looking completely composed, was Jessica. James rubbed his eyes. Jess? What are you doing here? Get away from her. Jessica looked at him, her face devoid of the ditzy expression she had worn for months. She pushed her glasses up her nose, glasses James had never seen her wear. Hello, James, Jessica said. Her voice was articulate, sharp, professional. Or should I refer to you as Subject 402? Subject what? James stammered. Jessica isn't a model, James, Adele said, standing up. She walked to the edge of the stage. Jessica is a senior forensic accountant and private investigator from London. I hired her 6 months ago. James felt the room spin. You hired her? I suspected you were stealing from the company, Adele explained. But I needed proof, and I needed to know if your incompetence was deliberate or just natural stupidity. So Jessica went undercover. Jessica stepped forward. It was quite a difficult role, James. Pretending to be interested in your stories about high school football was the hardest job of my career. But you made it easy. You bragged about the offshore accounts in your sleep. You showed me the hidden ledgers on your laptop to impress me. It was a honeypot, James whispered, the realization crushing him. The whole affair, it was a setup. The affair was your choice, James, Adele said. Jessica just gave you the opportunity. You dug your own grave. She just handed you the shovel. Adele threw a folder onto the floor in front of him. That file contains evidence of embezzlement, corporate espionage, and fraud, enough to put you in federal prison for 20 years. James fell to his knees. Adele, please, I'm family. No, Adele said. You were a mistake. She looked at Gabriel. Give him the choice. Gabriel stepped forward, towering over James. He held out 2 items. In his left hand, a one-way plane ticket to a remote island in Southeast Asia. In his right hand, the phone with the police on speed dial. Option A, Gabriel rumbled. You leave tonight. You never return to the US. You never speak the name Sterling or Vance again. You live in a hut and fish for your dinner. Option B, Adele finished. We give the file to the FBI. You go to prison. And trust me, James, in prison, you won't be the boss. You'll be the placeholder for someone much worse than me. James looked at the ticket, then at the phone. He looked at the woman he had underestimated, the mistress who had played him, and the mob boss who was now the power behind the throne. He grabbed the ticket. Good choice, Gabriel said. James stood up, broken. He walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned back one last time. Who are you really, Adele? He asked, his voice trembling. Adele stood next to Gabriel. The mob boss placed a protective hand on her waist. She didn't pull away. She leaned into it. I'm the owner, Adele said, and the house always wins. James walked out into the night, disappearing forever. Adele turned to Gabriel. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted, but exhilarated. Is it done? She asked. The threat is gone, Gabriel said, but the partnership is just beginning. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a flask in his jacket. He handed one to her. To the Queen, Gabriel toasted, his eyes burning with an intensity that promised trouble, passion, and power. Adele clinked her glass against his. A smile played on her lips, not the smile of a housewife, but the smile of a ruler who had found her king. To the wolf, she replied. They drank, the liquid warm and sharp, as the sun began to rise over a city that was now theirs to rule. And so, James Thorne learned the hardest lesson of his life. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the library. He chased the glitter of a fake life and lost the diamond that was holding him up. Adele didn't just survive, she evolved. She embraced her power, cleared the rot from her life, and found an ally who saw her true worth. Sometimes, the person you discard is the very person holding the keys to your destruction. Wow, what a journey. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and the ultimate power move, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And tell me in the comments, do you think Adele made the right choice, allying with Gabriel, or did she just trade one danger for another? Type Team Adele if you think she's a boss. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.